In the South Bronx, the teachers at the Wildflower New York Charter School are creating a nurturing space for children's intellectual and emotional development. Located in the Morrisania neighborhood, the charter school is a collection of 3 separate Montessori microschools that prioritize child-led learning, including for the more than 30% of their students with identified special needs. The Wildflower New York Charter School is part of the National Wildflower Montessori's network of microschools that's focused on activating and supporting teacher entrepreneurs to serve their local neighborhoods within an intentionally small, mixed-age, personalized setting. The first Wildflower School opened in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2014. Today, there are more than 60 of these microschools across the US and Puerto Rico. Most of them are private, but the Wildflower Public Charter microschools are also operating now in Minneapolis and Washington, D.C., in addition to New York City. Our guests today are Cely and Mario Benabe, 2 of the teacher entrepreneurs who helped to open the Wildflower New York Charter School in the fall of 2020. I had a chance a few weeks ago to meet Auda and Mario and visit their amazing school. And I'm so glad that they're here today to share more of their story. So Auda and Mario, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. We're humbled.
Oh, it's great to have you here. I was humbled. I thought it was just such an incredible school. So incredible to see what you've built there, this very warm and nurturing and tranquil learning environment where kids are able to move at their own pace and really interact with these incredible Montessori manipulatives. So just a lovely space. And I want to get more into why you decided to open your Wildflower School and your vision for that. But let's start back with your own personal journeys toward education and specifically Montessori. Mario, maybe we can start with you. Your background was with Teach for America and starting off your career in a district school. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that experience and then what kind of transpired from there for you.
Yes, thank you again for having me. And my educational experience started through Teach for America, which I'm greatly thankful for the opportunity to be able to teach in my community just after my my undergraduate experience. I've been mentored by a great educator named Dr. Christopher Emden, who has written a lot of tremendous literature on hip hop education, the intersections of culture, race, and science. And it was through his mentorship and inspiration as my 7th grade teacher, but constantly having his presence around me really got me into education. And I saw Teach for America as an opportunity to get into the classroom and receive higher education all at the same time. And so I joined the Bronx River High School in District 8 in the Bronx, in a community that I was very familiar with. And, my work there was as a special education support staff for students in the algebra curriculum. And after that, I met 3 incredible, inspiring school leaders that who are named Harvey Chisholm, Natalie Farrell, and John Clemente on their brainchild called South Bronx Community Charter High School. And so I supported them in looking at their application to their authorizers. And from there, I joined as a founding team member. After that, I got really inspired by Cely, who really brings in a wealth of knowledge around the Montessori ethos and the importance of it in early childhood education and in elementary education. And since then, we've been able to come together, work with the Wildflower Foundation, and create something magical in our community.
Magical indeed. So Auda, tell us a little bit more about your background then and your teaching experience and how you found your way to Montessori and ultimately to Wildflower.
So I started my career as a teacher, as a bilingual educator in San Antonio, Texas. And I was a teacher there in first grade and in third grade. And I just fell in love with teaching. I really loved being in the classroom. And prior to that, sometime in my undergraduate career, I also had some experiences in the AmeriCorps and was able to work with children in Head Start. And what I loved the most about working with children was just how brilliant and the curiosity, and that in and of itself really inspired and guided me to look for alternative methods of education after having some some experience in traditional education. What really inspired me was that I just love being with the children, but with with those early grades, I noticed that so much of their learning just happened so naturally and curiously, and I was interested in fostering more of the intrinsic motivation as opposed to some of the rewards that is often commonplace in some of our traditional methods of education. So from those experiences, I came across Montessori, and I absolutely fell in love with the method.
So, Auda, I'm sure most of my listeners and viewers have heard of Montessori. Some might even have kind of a rough understanding. But can you share a bit about the philosophy of Montessori and Maria Montessori's kind of pioneering work in creating this educational approach?
Oh, yeah. So the Montessori approach has a big emphasis on experiential learning as well as individualized approaches. So the children have more of an opportunity to make choices, but they're all guided within what is this larger dynamic of discipline. And there's a big emphasis on that because the larger focus of the model is for the children to really love to learn. And all of that comes together with a guidance from the teachers. It differs from what we might often say in traditional education as a stage on the stage and all of the children are learning at the same time. The Montessori approach gives us an alternative to give the children more time, individualized learning, using a large degree of experiential opportunities and as well as materials. We use a lot of concrete materials in Montessori, and that has been such a tremendous experience as an educator, just to see how the amount of learning that comes from the children having access to those materials at a very early age.
So then what started you both thinking about the prospect of creating the Wildflower New York Charter School? I know, Mario, you said you had some experience previously in being on the founding team of a different charter school. What started happening with the conversations between the two of you and others that led you down this path?
I can start, but Outer really should take on this question because again, it's her energy that brought a lot of the Montessori, the wildflower pieces. I tend to hold a lot of the community, aspects of this work, but I will tell it, and I would really love for Outer to step in. So back in, I'll say 2017, both Outer and I we're really looking into leadership positions out in and outside of the classroom. Teach for America has an organization that they work with called Leadership for Educational Equity. And what they do is they support educators of various backgrounds to pursue policy advocacy, pursue elected leadership positions. And so I attended a conference that was sponsored by Lee, and it brought in like Latinx educators from across the nation. And we got to really get a wide swath of the issues that impact children in their communities. And so Auda and I were a part of a small group, and that was when I really first heard the word, Montessori as an alternative method to education. And I was very curious at, learning more about Montessori education because it wasn't in my, graduate school education. And so the way Auda positioned Maria Montessori's work really got me to a place of wanting this for my community. And so I'll pass the story on from there to Auda.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I was deeply inspired by the Montessori philosophy and really appreciated its emphasis on intrinsic motivation, process-based learning, and really inspiring the children to love to learn. And I spent a great deal of my days just working to make my classroom Montessori environment really as the theory would have had it. Really, I wanted to see the theory really lifting off paper. And I spent just a few years just working really hard. And during that time, I met Mario at one of the policy conferences that he was mentioning, an educational policy conference. And I shared more about my passion with him and invited him to, he was interested, and invited him to come and see the classroom. And he really left that day saying, this is exactly what I want for my community. I want to bring model, yeah, to the South Bronx.
Yeah. So Mario, you grew up in the South Bronx, right near where the charter school is currently located. What was the process like at the time of going from, yes, we should open a charter school in New York City, to jumping through all of the hoops required to do that? What was that like?
We had first I'll say we had tremendous support. This was more than us, and it was more people involved, and particularly the people that were involved that mean the most were members of our community. So Auda and I really did a community tour. We really went to all facets of our community. We went to the community board, we went to the elected leaders, we went to parents, we went to CBOs in the neighborhood, organizations that have historically been there, had been led by people from the community. And we wanted to just take note of their experiences, introduce this alternative model to education. And the community responded very positively to this. So the way that me and Auda like to frame it is really that we asked permission, and we really asked permission. We wanted people in our neighborhood, in our community, to say yes before we even decided to submit an application to SUNY. We wanted really to deeply feel the level of community support, and we got that. And from there, we had the support from the Wildflower Foundation, who supported us in the application process, really piecing together and pulling apart what does it take to open, and even just to apply to a charter school at a very sensitive time, knowing that there were 7 charters left in New York City because of the cap. And so we were one of those, we were one of many applicants, and we were very fortunate that SUNY's Board of Trustees entrusted us with something so beautiful, and approved our model. And we took a planning year, and after that, COVID hit. And we had it done everything prior to just having a successful opening. And we were really impacted in so many ways by COVID. And Auda, I really brought in a lot of the life around, like, how can we still bring Montessori education virtually, remotely, during like this global pandemic. And she has so many incredible ideas that I will let her share, but is really a part of our story, and why it's important. that, you know, when when it feels like the world has stopped, like we owe it to the children to make this model work.
Yeah, Auda, tell us a little bit more about that. What was it like launching your inaugural year in the middle of a pandemic?
Right. I mean, it was in so many ways, it asked so much of us in ways that we could have never imagined. And so there were so many degrees of heartbreak because we had been planning so much, and so much of the model is about being in person and experiences. And there's even this whole section of Montessori called Practical Life, where the children get to make their own food. And none of that would have been ideal during COVID. So we really took it upon ourselves to rethink how we could still offer the families the best and the highest quality of service, even during this pandemic that, you know, we had so little control over what could happen and what all of the different options were. So I held really strong onto the notion of experience and concrete learning because, as I had said earlier, I felt that was just such a important part of the model, and it was something that drew me really strongly to it initially. And you know, despite the pandemic, this is still the children's childhood. Like, this is their really precious time, and how could we take, you know, as much you know, how could we use our resources as wisely as possible and still offer the children a degree of this experiential learning and hands-on experiences. So what we did was we collected all of the materials that we'd already purchased and organized, and we actually were lucky enough to have this micro school model that allowed us to be nimble, and we're so neighborhood nested that our families really live within such a close radius to our school. We packed a lot of materials, you know, math manipulatives, practical life manipulatives, and we delivered them to each family. We hopped on city bikes actually, and we're able to divide ourselves amongst teacher leaders and deliver those materials. You know, each child was able to have their own tablet, and we still had daily instruction Monday through Friday virtually, and we worked really closely with parents about the ways in which to have the materials available for the children. And it was a success. Like, ultimately, it was the best of what we could do with the circumstances at hand.
And we have a really close partnership with a program that's called Haketi Montessori. And Haketi Montessori is a Bronx-based parent-child Montessori program. And they emphasize the value and work of bringing Montessori to the home. And so in addition to bringing students the materials, we had this incredible educator, Francis, who worked with our parents to support them around how do we build a Montessori home? Can we foster independence at home? And there were activities that, you know, she shared with our parents. And it was and it was also very individualized. She worked with parents individually. We sponsored the sessions for parents, and that was another way of really allowing for this model to exist in the home. And the constraints of COVID made the work of doing it in person difficult, but we really thought about every aspect of making this model come alive.
So now you're about 2.5 years into running the school. When I visited, everything seemed sort of back to normal. And maybe you could tell us about the 3 microschools that kind of make up Wildflower New York City Charter School. How does it look?
So I'll start with the micro school that I lead, which is the Gloria Alston Children's Learning Center. Gloria Alston being an elder in our community who is still with us, who runs a program called Children's Circle, and has been doing this work for 50 years. And my micro school sits right across the hall from her office, the same office she had for all these years. And I just say that because we do emphasize the intergenerational aspects of child development and how much is very critical and needed for children to develop with elders in front of them. And Auda can, share her micro school, and then I'll go back into our third.
Yeah, so I'm currently the teacher leader at the Rose School, which is the lower elementary portion. It's first, second, and third grade. We have mixed age groups, and it might help to make sense that the Montessori philosophies are broken up into developmental stages. Montessori herself was a doctor, and so she based a lot of her philosophy on the biology of children and child development. So for that reason, the classrooms are organized based on developmental stages. And so we have our 3 through 6 classroom, and we have our 6 to 9 classroom. And so I am the teacher leader here of mixed ages 6, 7, and 8, which would be first, second, and third grade.
And then we have a phenomenal educator named Aisha Seawright Moses, who leads the Bronx Chrysalis Montessori School as a micro school within Wildflower New York Charter School. And, Aisha, she's just so inspiring in so many different ways. She herself is a Montessori parent. She was in the private sector, working in finance, and then made the transition to education because of her experiences as a parent. And we hired her on staff. Her qualifications were just off the chart. Like when we talk about our model being a teacher leader, she had all of that. She was certified in early childhood education, both in birth to second and 1 through 6. She has experience in finances, and leading her own business. And so the entrepreneurial spirit just lived within her. And I brought her on staff within the Gloria Austin Children's Learning Center, so she could really see how the teacher leader model play out. And we invested in her Montessori training, so that she can get AMI, American Montessori International, which is a credentialing organization that supports in the development of Montessori educators. And it's a training center that Maria Montessori herself started, and we're all AMI certified educators at Wildflower New York Charter School. And she went through our school startup journey, which is a self-paced with the support of the foundation learning what does it take to lead school. And so she went through the school startup journey. It's initially owning your own hiring, which is something that I feel is very unique to us, because oftentimes when you experience applying for a position, it's very different from what we do. We don't have you come in and do interviews. Yes, we do that, but it's really more about the person who is an emerging teacher leader owning the decision to say, I'm ready to open up this micro school. And there's deliverables and things that we that they will submit to us as reference to like their readiness. And Aisha by she did it all. And she's made this beautiful space for young people. And the Bronx Chrysalis is growing, and those children will become very much beautiful butterflies and special young beings in their neighborhoods.
Yeah, you've used some important terms, teacher leader and neighborhood nested. And starting with the teacher leader piece, that is such a crucial part, I think, of not only the Wildflower Montessori network nationally, but very much a part of what you're building in the South Bronx, where it's very decentralized. Teachers are truly the ones who have the autonomy and the independence to run these programs, work collaboratively with each other, and really are empowered to do that. And then the neighborhood nested piece is where you really are drawing from, I love this kind of your South Bronx chrysalis, of reaching out to families locally and having this be a nurturing space. And you mentioned that roughly 30% of your students have identified special needs. I know when we talked, Mario, when I visited, you thought that that was even slightly more than some typical schools in the area. And I wonder if that's something that you were conscious about as you were building the program. Has that been an opportunity for you, a challenge? How does that look in real life?
You know, when you have a charter school, you can there's what we call different how could I say it? There's you can basically basically like we prioritize, right? You can prioritize, you have to prioritize students in your district when you run the lottery. So there's an option to prioritize students with special education, and there's, sorry it took me so long to get to this point, but you can also prioritize English language learners. Like we haven't opted into any of those options as a school where we could prioritize those populations. These population of students have been largely coming to us because of parents' need for alternative methods to education. So we hear cases where like a parent comes to us and say, like, I've been looking for a Montessori program my whole life in our neighborhood, and then you guys come up. We have like parents who would say, the option that I currently have is not working for my child. I would like to see how this model supports them. And so and there's varying stories for each of them, and all of them are, very special. And at the core of it is that parents want individualized learning for their child, and and they want their child to alter their own journeys, their own academic interests, and we're here to foster that and guide the young children to get to that point. And we do service a high population of special education students, and we know that it's very critical that students who are who are neurodiverse, that they have the Montessori calls it the prepared environment, and we aid all aspects of their development. And so, Autumn, if you want to share more about how does it look, that would be really important.
Yeah, I'm honestly so humbled to be able to support and service that need in our community, because the Montessori philosophy itself started with children with a variety of disabilities and special needs. And it is just tremendous for us to be able to provide a nurturing environment where children with disabilities or all kind of neurodivergence have access to a space that can really honor their strengths and their individuality, and create a classroom where the focus really is on the process of learning and inspiring that joy. But what makes it, what has, I think, brought a lot of families to our school is the ability for us to really individualize and really cater to those experiences and those needs. And so we work I mean, I love working with families because the micro school model really allows for a closer connection with families. And I love being able to work one-on-one with families, really support in developing the child's strength and using that to help them really enjoy and love being in the classroom while at the same time challenging them in other areas of growth. But it's always, it really allows a child to unfold their personality. Which has been, it just has been such an essential part of our program, and we're really honored because we've had families that have come to us after trying multiple schools and having a series of scenarios that might have not been the best fit for them, and they were able to come to us and we were able to provide that space for them. So it's something that has been really special to support and be a part of here in our community.
Oh, it's really so great. And, I know Montessori schools exist across the country. Most of them are private, oftentimes very expensive and inaccessible to most families. You have these beautiful spaces, high quality materials and manipulatives. And you're showing in the South Bronx that you can make this model and this philosophy accessible to all families that you can serve tuition free with the charter model. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, are there any challenges with that as of being a public charter school, trying to stay true to the Montessori mission? Does it ever feel tricky in that way?
Yeah, I can definitely take that question, especially being in lower elementary. We start to have second and third grade children. So it's definitely an area of creativity, challenge, but what's really wonderful about what we've got here is our early childhood program. And so when the children have had those early childhood experiences, it really sets a wonderful foundation for them to move forward with their academics in many ways further along than some of their regular age standards. So that has allowed us to continue to implement the Montessori philosophy as authentically as we can, while at the same time balancing the need for to ensure they're meeting Common Core standards, all degrees of public accountability, and there's definitely a constant analysis and reflection of how we're embedding both, but we do our best to honor the authenticity and the essence and really some of the pillars that our family signed up for when they came to a Montessori school, a school that individualizes education for their children. So yes, definitely an area that's tricky, but there have been so many wonderful opportunities for us to make it work. And thus far, we've seen a lot of great things.
Yeah, and it sounds like when you have that foundation with the Montessori philosophy, then it shows that the academics come to and the students are able to meet whatever kind of external objectives are put in front of them as well. Sorry, Mario, you were going to add?
Yeah, I really appreciate, the recognition around like us providing this model like tuition free. And that's just really important. It's important historically, it's important for the time that we're in now. It's important for like where education is shaping, like, I don't want post COVID and, as the world is trying to get back together and like, the fact that we, in some, areas in the city, this model is $50,000 and, $40,000 to $50,000 and, which is about double than what we get from the state. And so, we're doing our best to work within even the confines of like the finances to make this, come alive. But we know that, our children deserve this. And, we are doing nothing but truly serving families, and I think it's important to just highlight, it comes with some constraints, some legislative constraints, but we're still offering it with its highest fidelity. And, in the hopes that, more elected leadership nationally just really look at Montessori in totality, and see if there could come some national influence and policy from just observing model like our school and other Montessori programs, and say, hey, this is an option that we can commit to offering families everywhere.
I really think you are a model for other charter school founders to follow. I mean, you walk into these microschools and they're just breathtaking. I mean, they look like these $50,000 private Montessori schools. They're just gorgeous. And the teachers, as you mentioned, are incredibly well trained. You pay for them to get training in Montessori methods. I know, Mario, when I visited your classroom, you have a couple of male educators as well, which is often something we don't see as much in early childhood, especially, and such an important role model for your students there. There's just so many great things happening. And I'm wondering what feedback you've gotten from parents whose children may have been in a conventional school and came to your Wildflower charter school. What have they said to you?
I mean, so many things. I would like to start. I have the younger children, the fours and the kinders, and a lot of what parents really highlight is the development of their children, with speech, with like patience, with wanting to support in the home, with asking parents, like, my child, he doesn't even ask me to go to the park anymore. He asks me to go to the library. Like, this is for us, is like, it's the life shaping that parents are sharing with us, that aside from the importance of all of the academics, but the fact that their children are growing young, healthy citizens, and are like really even questioning. Like, parents have told me, their kids are like starting to identify things in the community that they want to see change. Maybe a cleaner neighborhood, better parks. Like, this is coming from 4 and 5 year olds. And that for me is also the work. And it's not, yeah, is doing that in a way that we're not so much influencing it, but we're just guiding children to within their own interests, and something is sparking with them to understand that I can see, I want change, and and they can like take ownership of that. So it's everything. Every conversation with parents is just so important. And you know there's just so many more, but it's really about like how those children are really like becoming self advocates, and that's really it for me.
Could you add anything, Auda?
Yeah, I mean, the experience, I would echo so many of the same things, but I think parents, especially since I'm getting some parents that have been with us for 3 years now, they are really loving really some of the results in their child's self-confidence and personality and self-initiative and their self-expression. One of the wonderful things about our model is that there's an open work cycle where children have these 3-hour long periods to engage in big work. So long projects, oftentimes it takes them multiple days, and it gives so much space for creativity and imagination, and for them to even practice their own leadership. And so we have one parent that 3 years ago, when I remember enrolling this parent, she said, I feel that I manifested a Montessori school for my child, because I have wanted this for so long, but it wouldn't have been something that I would have been able to afford. And we're so happy to be able to offer it here completely free of cost. And 3 years later, this child is actually writing a chapter book. She's a first grader. She's writing a chapter book called Black Lives Matter. And one of the, we work so much on identity and ensuring that the children feel really good about who they are inside, outside. And it's just such a joyful experience to watch her undergo that. And in one of her chapters, she writes how proud she is to be part of a Black community, to be part of a Black family, and how much she appreciates, like how much she enjoys going to a Black Montessori school. And I thought that was really special, because the opportunities for that just nationally, to be able to have a predominantly Black and brown Montessori space are just so few. And so I think that just hearing from the children, for example, her story, writing something like that spontaneously, during this open-ended work cycle is really part of the reason why we do this, and allowing children to unfold their personalities and share about their experiences.
It's such a great story. And so I think so indicative of what you're talking about, that when we give children freedom, time, space, respect, resources, they're able to do incredible things. And you're providing that for your students there. So you're almost 3 years in to running the Wildflower New York Charter School. What do you see 3 years from now? What will your program be like then, do you hope?
Well, 3 years from now, I see two more, neighborhood nested schools, and we have, potential candidates for those micro school sites. So I see those sites opening and flourishing. I see us getting renewed by our contract renewal. I see us really partnering with the district on early childhood education and alternative models for pre-K. And we've received a lot of positive feedback from pre-K stakeholders on our program already. And I see us just really living within the teacher leader model, the neighborhood nested, our 9 principles, just really living into our Wildflower 9 principles, and just being an innovative space, and and a continued option for parents.
Right. And I would echo so many of the same things, but it's also about continuing to strengthen our program, to continue to, honestly, in many ways, trailblaze what what offering an authentic public Montessori experience looks like for our community, and strengthening our partnerships, our community partnerships, our parent programs, for example, that have been, we've had parent programs running since the first year. Now we're in our 3rd year. We're really glad to be able to have these amazing partnerships. We have a partnership with a local high school. We have high schoolers that come and volunteer their time on a weekly basis, and all of that is really living into this notion of being a neighborhood nested school, and making use of all of the community resources. So yeah, there are so many ways that I envision our program continuing to develop years from now, and I'm looking forward to the growth and the joy in the community that we can build for parents and their children.
I think that's right. I can see 3 years from now, you making a bigger impact in your community in the South Bronx and in New York City more generally with the students you're able to reach. But I also see you making a bigger impact as an inspiration for other teacher leaders, teacher entrepreneurs who may want to open a similar program elsewhere. What advice would you give to someone listening or watching who would like to open a tuition-free Montessori school? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I got chills as you posed the question, because I still think about, you know, what it took to get to this space, and the support that came with an idea. And so if anyone is watching, um, whether it's Montessori, whether it's another method, whether it's your method, in educating the wholeness of the child, I would really say to go for it, to do it. There are organizations out there that are willing to help. There are organizations that, like the Wildflower Foundation. There are funders like the Vela Foundation, who are really looking into, innovative, small, micro school models, to really have an impact on, children's lives. So the support is out there. Find it, do it.
Yeah, I would say to go for it. We all know that feeling in our hearts, especially educators that just love what they do and dedicate countless hours in the classroom, and are coupled with this entrepreneurial spirit, this creative spirit. And if that's what calls people, I say go for it, because um, it's a journey. And for those of us that love being in the classroom and love supporting children, we tend to ourselves be love the journey, love to honor our own journey, our own learning journey as well. And that's what so much of this is. It's a constant learning experience. And so if it's in people's heart, I say go for it, because it will probably continue to call you over and over again. That's really what brought me here. And also to build community, because as much as we often are so service-based, right, as educators, we just want to give so much of ourselves, but of course it's so much of it is hard and impossible to do alone. And I wouldn't have obviously been able to do any of this without the strong partnerships and community that we have built along the way. So building community, and if it's in your heart, definitely go for it.
Ah, such great advice, and great inspiration for aspiring entrepreneurs who are wanting to create something similar to what you've created. Mario, you mentioned the Wildflower Foundation that supports some of the work, and that obviously is part of this kind of national network or international network of Montessori-inspired microschools. You mentioned the Vela Education Fund that provides philanthropy in the form of microgrants to microschools and other kind of individualized innovative models. You were a recipient of a Vela microgrant as well. So there are these resources and connections to be made. But if my listeners and viewers wanted to connect with both of you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yes, absolutely. So you can reach us at our school through our school website, www.wildflowernewyorkcharterschool.com. We also have a Facebook and Instagram page. If you search Wildflower New York Charter School, we will show up. Our direct email is info@wildflowernewyorkcharterschool.org. Wildflower New York Charter School being spelled out. And me specifically, if you would like to reach out to me, is Mario at GloriaAustinCLC.org. I would be very happy to connect with anyone who feels inspired, or have any general questions or follow-up questions.
And likewise, please feel free to reach out to us in our social media. And my email would be aura@gloriaaustinCLC.org. And I'd be happy to connect with anyone that's interested in learning more.
Well, I am so excited by what you're doing, and so excited to see where it leads, not only for you and the work you're doing in the South Bronx, but also nationally as real pioneers in this work to bring tuition-free Montessori education to more and more children. So Aura, Cely, and Mario Benabe, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.